The White House just handed American automakers a big win, if you want to call it that, announcing that vehicle manufacturers here will be spared the worst of the new tariffs so long as they commit to building right here in the U.S. of A. Ford praising the decision, saying it will help protect consumers and support growth. And the president is heading to Michigan tonight to tout it as a win for working Americans. Meanwhile, Charlie Gasparino reporting that a trade deal announcement could be imminent as the U.S. tries to get key negotiations across the finish line. China remains the focus, the administration looking to put the squeeze on Beijing and level the trading field.
Over time, we will see that the Chinese tariffs are unsustainable for China. Remember that we are the deficit country. They sell almost 5 times more goods to us than we sell to them. So the onus will be on them to take off these tariffs.
Charlie, I listened to Bessent's comments this morning twice. I went back and listened to them.
My condolences.
all over again. They were short. Quote, "The aperture of uncertainty will be narrowing," was one of my favorite quotes. As we
I love when they use the word aperture.
Yeah.
It's a big SAT word.
Yeah.
As we start moving forward, announcing these deals, and based on it kind of dovetails with your reporting that Bessent said that was talking about the Asian trading partners, I could see announcements on India, easier to negotiate. And it definitely seemed with Vance and Modi meeting recently, the progress at least seemed to be the greatest with India. And then maybe next, he said, South Korea. I could see the contours of a deal with South Korea, and then substantial talks are happening with Japan.
Yeah, Japan has to do with the LNG pipeline, from what I understand, negotiating just how much they're going to buy out of that. That's what I'm getting from my sources. South Korea wants to come to the table. They said it last week. India obviously is there. I reported it last week, and the markets went up 1,000 points. I think it was something like 1,000 points. You were on the air at the time. What's so weird about this, just this market reaction to this stuff, is that this is kind of like small potatoes. I mean, you know, I worry about short-term movements in the markets and, you know, making that the stamp of approval because, you know, India is small potatoes, even Japan. I mean, the real big kahuna here is China and the EU. And what are we doing with them? And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. And I will say this, you know, what we don't know, and I think we're going to find this out in the next 6 weeks, at least that's the number I've been given, 6 to 8 weeks, is just how much damage, you know, what we've done so far has done to the economy. We just don't know. I mean, there's countervailing forces. The president tomorrow is going to announce like $3 trillion of net investments in the U.S., right? But then there's the uncertainty that the tariffs caused. And so that's negative. So we don't know. I mean, you know, no one's going to criticize them for wanting to do the right thing by the American people, bring jobs back. Was the approach right? I will say this. Trump was elected after 2 of the most dysfunctional politicians ran this country this time last year, right? So he was elected to get rid of, you know, close the border, get rid of some of that weird cultural stuff, the woke stuff, and inflation. Inflation rates came down, prices remained high. One thing that the tariff stuff could do, at least in the short term, before the pot of gold is achieved, so to speak, if you listen to Howard Bessent, is lead to inflation. And if we get that, depending on how long it lasts, it could really screw up the midterms. It could make his approval ratings now look pretty good. So just remember, this is a moving target, and you know, you hope for the best. I'm a patriot. I want him to win. But just remember out there, if you're investing and you're planning for the economy, small businesses are already feeling it. I mean, they're just saying it.
Farmers, because of their exports to China. One thing that Bessent, anybody can jump in here, said about China when asked about it this morning. China sells 5 times more goods to us than we do to them. The Chinese tariffs that they have in place are unsustainable for China. And China could lose 10 million jobs very quickly. Even if they drop the tariffs, they could lose 5 million based on the research that he's seen. So.
And I think he was backing off of the comments that he made last week, which was that we were sort of dictating that China needs to change the basis of its entire economy, which is an export economy. And now he's talking about China and its weak spots with respect to the U.S. and the bargaining chips that we have as they're going to the table to negotiate. What I liked about what he did this morning was I thought he was very coherent. I thought he was as transparent as he could be right now.
You like the word aperture.
I like the word aperture. I'm a big SAT word person. And he was telling us as much as he could. Also, we're not hearing from Navarro and we're not hearing from Lutnick, even though Lutnick, we're told, is making some of those deals behind the scenes.
Lutnick is definitely involved, just so you know.
But he was not a great explainer to the American people. And so I think that was a good move media-wise. I think they're sort of honing in on what their communication strategy is, which we've been saying for a long time is so important. One of the reporters asked about pauses. And after this 90 days, if we could get another pause. And I wasn't really clear. I don't really feel like he gave a clear answer on that because they don't necessarily know. But yesterday on Mornings with Maria had the CEO of Therabody, and he was talking about how he wanted to move manufacturing here, but that it takes a while. It could take up to 3 years to be able to do that. You start to lay the groundwork now. So even in the case of the autos, for example, if they want to try to manufacture certain parts here that they're not making here, it's going to take time. And I want more clarity on how much time they're going to give companies to be able to set up these operations and do these things. If you're not Apple and you can't just say, well, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to do it there by the end of next year, what are the timelines like? Because I think when the CEOs start to hear that they've got more of a runway to do it, they'll be more open to it as well.
And by the way, you said India. Are they going to accept India as an appropriate place for Apple to move the jobs?
Right.
We don't know. I would say, maybe take the half win. It's out of China. But will they accept it? Will the administration accept that?
Well, we talk about small business versus ginormo business. Apple and all these technology manufacturers, smartphone manufacturers have an exemption right now.
Right.
That they don't have any tariffs at all coming out of other countries other than China, and only 20% tariff coming out of China on the iPhones that are manufactured there and other goods. But Brian, go ahead.
I just want to cast my vote with the people who like the word aperture.
Thank you.
I thought Scott Bessent was awesome this morning for one big reason. He doesn't say more than he needs to say. And maybe if I could add a second, I think he also understands the issues better than anybody else who's been talking on this.
Maybe he doesn't know anything. Doesn't know.
I disagree.
Maybe doesn't know
with that.
what's going to happen.
No, I disagree. I think he has been chosen as the lead messenger on this because he gets it right. And I'm going to say I was heartened by the auto tariff exemptions. And Dagan, I'm with you. It's probably not going far enough for these guys because they are beleaguered. But what I'm seeing out of the administration day to day, week to week, is moves toward reducing uncertainty and giving these guys more of an on-ramp. I mean, the automakers want an on-ramp. They're starting to get that with these reimbursements that they can use and not getting the steel tariffs stacked on top of them. I think you're probably going to get the same thing out of the pharma guys. You've got, we're going to talk about the big investment announcements they've made. I think you're going to get an on-ramp for them as well. All that to say, they're not going from 0 to 60 in terms of reducing the uncertainty, but they are going from like 0 to 10 and 10 to 15 and 15 to 20, and that's really important.
Let me just give you a little insight from inside the White House, okay? Source of mine went to meet Bessent a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he said, here are the things that we think we're going to get. And he mentioned India, Japan, down the line. He goes, but remember, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the meaning's the same. I'm just the Treasury Secretary. Trump makes the final word.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why there's uncertainty here. You just don't know.
And that's how I wanted to sort of finish.
And that's why Bessent doesn't say more
than he should or can.
Because he doesn't know.
Right, he doesn't know. And that's just how I would, cap my point that I was making before, which is that there's still too much uncertainty and there's still too many moving parts and there's still too many decisions that have to be made that depend on the dominoes and how they fall and what other countries are saying to us. And so I think as long as we're in this sort of bumpy period of uncertainty, you're still going to experience, just to bring it back to the market volatility as well, even though things have been stable the last few days.
Let me just quickly throw something into the mix here. Morgan Stanley came out with a note this morning, and they think that the robotics market is going to be bigger than the entire global auto market by 2050. They think there's going to be 1 billion humanoids out there by 2050. Not to say that we are not rightly focused on tariffs in this moment as they relate to autos, and this was a president who was elected on the big three, on Detroit, on the Midwest, on people so sick of their jobs being exported to slave labor overseas. And that I totally sympathize and understand. But I am wondering if we're not focused enough on the next leg of this, which is if robotics is going to be bigger than autos in 2 decades, what then? How do we do the advanced manufacturing here so that we can lead in that race? It's just sort of another point that I wanted to throw in there.
I can tell you that Morgan Stanley has absolutely no idea about robotics in 25 years from now.
Are you sure
for
about
them,
that?
yeah,
I mean,
for them to make a call like that.
Not no idea. I mean, they study the
A soupçon of an idea,
on,
Charlie.
come on.
25 years out.
Well, they have
Get
some
over
idea. They have some idea. No idea.
Because they have nothing to say. They have nothing to say about the current environment because there is uncertainty. So they're going to write this like long ball.
The analyst studies.
End zone.
The analyst that studies chips, robotics, has no idea about what might happen in the future. I mean, obviously, he knows more than us. I mean, no offense.
Yeah, but
it's not even close.
He doesn't know what happens a quarter.
Well,
of a
no one's going to
century
happen
from now.
tomorrow.
Well, I will
You
say
could say
Scott
that, too.
Bessent talked about that very kind of manufacturing this morning. He said, I don't want to make, it's not going to be like it was when I was growing up in North Carolina. I want to make precision manufacturing. That's what robots are.
Well,
so
oddly enough, Bessent
there?
said that. Oddly enough, Bessent said that, and it's actually textiles manufacturing that's coming back because we heard that from Jerry Willis yesterday.
But
there's a textile manufacturer who's adding 100 jobs down in North Carolina as we speak.
But as we talk about manufacturing, how many? I mean, we want people to work. I mean, are there going to be any people working on at these places?
Well, I asked someone that very question. It was a congresswoman last week about it's a bicycle manufacturer in Ohio. No, I forget what state it is. And there are robotics involved in them adding jobs in this bicycle manufacturer, but they have to add people jobs in addition to the robotics. One thing before we go, and I've said this over and over again, tariff revenue is going to be permanent, and Scott Bessent said that this morning, that he's talking about President Trump wants to take tariff revenue and give income tax relief, and it will be used to offset no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, and also restoring the tax deductibility of interest on a car loan if you buy an American-made car.
Doesn't that sound like pie in the sky, though?
No.
Come on.
Because he just met with the people writing this very bill yesterday, Bessent did. And if he's saying it today, I guarantee it's going to be...
He's saying give tax release to people making $200,000 or less.
No, that's not what Bessent said this morning.
Well,
he
Trump
said, I'm talking about what Bessent said this morning. Tariff relief as a revenue generator, tariffs as a revenue generator will be permanent, if not semi-permanent. My words, but this is something that is in President Trump's mind.